Ariana Brooks prided herself on her ability to create flawless travel itineraries for any occasion. She had carefully cultivated her brand at Adventure and Amour, her travel agency, that promised the thrill of a lifetime, accompanied by the romantic ambiance couples cherished. Her office was filled with meticulously organized brochures, each dedicated to a unique destination across all continents. She had a system of color coded folders on her computer and a library of postcards pinned to a corkboard, each bearing a heartfelt message from a satisfied couple. There was no place in the world Ariana considered off limits to love. She truly believed that a perfect trip could save a faltering relationship or strengthen one that was already thriving. Her biggest competitor in town was David Monroe, a celebrated consultant at Wanderlust Wedding. Their competition often spilled over into the local tourism board meetings, where they both volunteered. David, too, had a deep zeal for romantic escapes. But while Ariana's trademark was breathtaking adventure, David's style was pure luxury. He transformed five-star hotels into private realms of wonder, complete with candlelit suites and rose petal turndowns. Their rivalry stirred quite a bit of gossip among the staff at both agencies, each side eager to hear about the latest quarrel, the newest jab, or the boldest professional move the other had in store. For months, whispers circulated that a wealthy couple, rumored to be on the cusp of marriage, was seeking the grandest honeymoon imaginable. The bride's father was a well-known media mogul, exactly the kind of influential client that would bring substantial publicity to whichever agency won his favor. Ariana and David both knew that he was used to getting what he wanted, and that in turn meant they had to be prepared to deliver perfection. As if guided by fate, both Ariana and David were asked to submit honeymoon proposals to the family on the same day. Ariana spent long nights at her desk, poring over maps of remote islands in the South Pacific and rifling through exotic experiences in Southeast Asia. She eventually settled on a combination: a private island villa near Bali, complete with personalized cooking classes, yoga sessions at sunrise, and guided snorkeling around colorful reefs. She'd even planned a culminating fireworks show on the final night. Her itinerary practically glittered with romance. David took a different angle. He suggested a multi-destination approach that covered both modern luxury and ancient wonder. From a suite in Santorini with an infinity pool overlooking the caldera to a two-night stay on a yacht cruising the Amalfi Coast. Every element dripped with extravagance: Michelin-starred dining, private helicopter tours over active volcanoes, and a dedicated butler service ready to fulfill every whim. It contrasted with Ariana's plan in almost every way. It was flashier where hers was intimate, grand where hers was serene. When the bride's father summoned them to a swanky bar downtown for a final pitch, Ariana and David warily eyed each other across the plush lounge. The mogul Donovan Chase sat between them, sipping a whiskey on the rocks, while Ariana and David laid out their respective proposals. Each tried to downplay the other's approach. David made sure to highlight how luxury experiences added glamour to a honeymoon tale for a lifetime, while Ariana insisted an authentic connection to local culture and natural wonders could spark love's deepest flame. Donovan listened attentively, tapping his fingers against the glass, as if his decision hung in the balance. Before he told them both what they least expected, in a no-nonsense tone, he proclaimed that he couldn't quite decide which experience best suited his daughter, because both offered something irresistible. He wanted them to merge their ideas into one colossal, unrivaled, unbelievably opulent romantic getaway. Collaborating was the last thing Ariana and David had in mind. But Donovan was unyielding. They must combine their strengths or he would look elsewhere. The consequences of losing this client were too dire, so they begrudgingly agreed. The two of them parted from the bar that evening with a mutual sense of frustration. Ariana refused to let David overshadow her creativity. David insisted he would not let Ariana's taste for rustic charm overshadow the polish he prided himself on. And yet, Something about this forced partnership intrigued them both. They had never worked together, but each recognized the other's remarkable skill. Soon enough, Ariana and David began the painstaking process of merging their concepts. They booked a next day meeting at Ariana's office, which was filled with the subtle scent of vanilla from a small candle burning on her desk. Her office decor hovered between tropical chic and business formal. David brought a box of pastries from a local bakery, claiming his sweet tooth made collaboration more tolerable. They set their coffees side by side, unfolded their proposals, and began scanning each other's meticulously documented research. Every so often, an edgy comment broke the silence. Ariana teased David for overusing five-star resorts, while David ribbed Ariana for insisting upon a series of low-key cultural excursions, which he termed overly quaint. Yet as the morning wore on, subtle glimpses of respect began to surface. As they continued to align schedules, flights, and on-the-ground logistics, the synergy between them grew evident. One idea, like a candlelit dinner on a cliff in Santorini, would blossom into a breathtaking centerpiece when paired with Ariana's proposal to follow it the next day with a private cooking lesson featuring local Greek delicacies. The more they wove their ideas together, the more they realized how well their separate visions could complement each other. David's penchant for elegance and Ariana's love of authentic local flavor began to intertwine. Their challenge, however, was to experience each location firsthand in order to finalize details before presenting the combined itinerary to Donovan. That meant traveling together. They found themselves boarding a plane to the Ionian Islands in Greece 2 weeks later to check the condition of the hotels David had proposed. The flight was tense, even though they were both hoping the in-person checks would prove beneficial. Sitting side by side, their laptops open, they discussed the schedule meticulously. One evening at the new boutique resort David had discovered in Corfu, followed by a high-speed ferry to Zakynthos to inspect a lavish cliffside venue for a candlelit dinner. Ariana meticulously noted whether the sunset vantage point was as striking as the promotional pictures suggested. If it passed her scrutiny, then David would handle the booking. During that trip, they encountered their first crisis: stormy weather. The day after they arrived, a tempest swept over Corfu, grounding flights and ferries. Ariana voiced concern about losing time. David insisted that if they were stuck, they might as well make productive use of the hours. They visited the resort staff to confirm every detail, from the quality of the honeymoon suite's linens to the courtesy of the waitstaff at dinner service. Ariana, stressed about meeting Donovan's deadline, found David's calmer presence unexpectedly soothing. He pointed out hidden vantage points for perfect romantic photographs, ways to highlight the natural beauty of the island that Ariana hadn't considered. In turn, Ariana convinced David to watch the local folk dance performance to gauge its entertainment value for honeymooners. As the thunder rumbled outside, they spent an evening in the hotel lounge, sipping wine as the floor vibrated under the lively pulse of Greek music. A moment of closeness emerged unexpectedly when the electricity went out due to the storm, leaving the lounge in dim candlelight. Something in the flickering warmth softened the tension between them. David, seeing Ariana's hair gently curling from the day's humidity, reached out to tuck a stray lock behind her ear. His fingers lingered a fraction of a second longer than necessary. She looked up, meeting his gaze. The music, the glow of candles, and the knowledge that they were in this beautiful place doing what they both loved, all that lent a sweetness to the air, neither could deny. They said very little, but the gravity between them felt new and electric. Once the storm cleared, they continued on to Zakynthos. There they confirmed the viability of a candlelit dinner, perched on a cliff with breathtaking panoramas of the turquoise sea. The entire day was consumed by comparing menus, tasting fresh seafood, and consulting with local chefs about the reliability of the supply chain. In every aspect, they sought to guarantee perfection. That evening, Ariana and David decided to dine at the very cliffside restaurant they were considering for their clients. They asked the staff to recreate the honeymoon dinner setup, complete with soft lighting and a gentle violin serenade. They wanted to gauge the ambiance. But from the moment they were escorted to the candlelit table, each felt an unspoken awareness. The plan had been to imagine themselves as the traveling couple, checking the vibe. Yet the dreamy pink and gold sunset, the swirling hush of waves far below, and the chiming notes of the violin conjured a romantic intimacy they hadn't quite expected. Ariana complimented David's initiative in getting them such a prime table. David, returning the courtesy, praised Ariana's sense for the personal touches, like local flowers scattered on the table, and a handwritten note for management, wishing the hypothetical honeymooners well. As they savored fresh fish drizzled with lemon and herbs, their conversation flowed more smoothly than it ever had. They moved from travel talk to childhood stories, sharing the tale of Ariana's first overseas trip at age 12 and David's teenage summer working at a posh resort in Spain. Slowly, they revealed their hopes and frustrations. Ariana admitting her fear of losing her sense of individuality if her agency grew too large, and David expressing concern that in pushing for extravagance, people might find him superficial. For the first time, they looked at each other not as professional rivals, but as two individuals with passion and vulnerability. When dinner ended, neither wanted to break the spell. Feeling bold, David escorted Ariana to the edge of the cliff's overlook. They exchanged a lingering glance. Both were aware that if they continued to blur the lines between work and personal feelings, things might grow complicated. But neither cared at that moment. Ariana leaned her head on David's shoulder, gazing into the purple dusk. He tentatively wrapped an arm around her waist. A gentle breeze pressed them closer. If a single moment could encapsulate possibility and desire, this was it. In the days that followed, their journey took them to Italy's Amalfi Coast, a decadent segment of David's original plan, and then on to Bali to investigate Ariana's private island idea. They decided that finalizing each part of the itinerary in person was crucial, not just for the client, but for them. Despite the long flights and the constant movement, they found their synergy growing. They discovered how well they balanced each other. David's flair introduced an element of cinematic beauty, while Ariana's cultural knowledge wove authenticity into every corner of the trip. Contrary to all expectations, as the journey continued, their after-work evenings together no longer felt forced. They spent moonlit walks on Amalfi beaches discussing the ephemeral nature of love. They took a small cooking class in Bali, where they teased each other about not remembering the exact mix of spices. Between them, laughter came easily, and in hushed, more intimate moments, they found themselves drawing together as if by some shared gravitational pull. One late afternoon, on a secluded shore in Bali, the sun began setting in vibrant streaks of orange and pink over the water. They were there to assess whether the beach was private enough for a vow renewal ceremony, but it was so serene and so empty that Ariana, moved by whimsy, couldn't resist stepping into the rolling surf to let the warm waves lap at her feet. David, nibbling on a slice of tropical fruit from a street vendor, watched her with a curious grin. She waved him over. He kicked off his sandals and joined her, the salt water gently encircling their ankles. Their conversation slowed as they stared out at the horizon. Caught between the hush of the sea and the fading sunlight, they turned to each other. An unspoken invitation danced in the air, and David leaned in. The kiss, when it happened, was soft, brimming with the promise of 1,000 more. It was a wordless acknowledgement that their rivalry had transformed into something far different than either had imagined. Together, they flew back to the States, returned to their daily routines, and swiftly arranged a final presentation for Donovan and his daughter. The weeks of preparation had crystallized into a cohesive masterpiece of romance, culture, and luxury. Donovan was impressed, though not fully surprised, by their success. The tension between Ariana and David had seemed to dissipate, replaced by an equilibrium neither of them openly explained. Ariana glowed while she described the private Balinese villa. David was equally enthusiastic about the Amalfi yacht excursion. Their combined excitement and knowledge convinced Donovan to finalize the deal. The handshake that followed was accompanied by more than just professional satisfaction. Ariana returned to her office. Leaning back in her chair, she relived the swirl of moments from their travels. She couldn't deny her growing feelings for David. Ever since returning, they had swapped texts, occasionally meeting for lunch or a quick afternoon coffee while claiming it was for client follow ups. But beneath the professional pretense, each rendezvous pulsed with an underlying connection that neither had the courage to define. The breakthrough came 2 weeks after their successful pitch. They were invited to an opulent party hosted by Donovan, ostensibly to announce the chosen honeymoon destinations to friends and family, but also to celebrate Ariana and David's collaboration. The venue was a chic downtown rooftop garden, complete with strings of glowing lights and a jazz quartet. Ariana arrived in a deep emerald dress, her hair swept to one side. David, spotting her from across the crowd, felt his breath catch. She wore the same perfume that had teased his senses in Greece. When she finally reached him, the conversation flowed smoothly from small talk to deeper admissions of how much each had missed the joint planning sessions. They stepped out onto the perimeter walkway, away from the chatter, to admire the view of the city skyline. David, gathering courage, confessed that he had never anticipated being so thoroughly captivated by another professional in his field. Ariana admitted she once saw him as nothing more than the flashy competition, but that after traveling together, she had seen his warmth and thoughtfulness. Their hands brushed. "I wish we had another big trip to plan," Ariana said. David turned to her. "Maybe we can plan one just for us," he replied quietly. In a flutter of excitement, they recognized that they'd spent so long composing dream escapes for others that they'd never indulge in something special for themselves. So, they decided they would do so and do it soon. Their new plan? A short getaway to the Caribbean. Nothing too extravagant, they agreed initially, but as they started exchanging ideas and building upon each other's suggestions, their imaginations once again soared to breathtaking places. 1 week later, Ariana and David stood in the check-in line at a small airport that offered flights to St. Lucia. There, they discovered a last-minute opening at a secluded five-star resort that boasted pristine beaches, hidden coves, and private bungalows. It had a champagne bar, oceanfront dining, and mesmerizing sunsets. The idea of traveling simply as a couple, not as business associates, lit a spark of excitement neither had felt in years of meticulously orchestrating trips for others. They planned to get to know each other's hearts, not just their professional sensibilities. From the second they landed in St. Lucia, the gentle Caribbean air wrapped them in a balmy embrace. Their bungalow perched on a hillside, overlooking turquoise waves. Floor-to-ceiling glass doors opened onto a deck with a plunge pool, and palm trees rustled in the background. Gone were the brochures and checklists. This was a trip for them alone. They savored sunrise coffee on the deck, unburdened by schedule or stress. Afternoons were for exploring. They snorkeled along vibrant coral reefs, swirling with neon fish, thick with the brine of the ocean. They hiked rainforest trails to discover waterfalls that fell in tranquil rivulets. Evenings melted into languid dinners, local rum cocktails, and the hush of ocean breezes. Sometimes, Ariana thought about how improbable their connection seemed, given their rivalry, but as she looked across a small bamboo table in a candlelit cove one evening, seeing David's face lit with genuine affection, she felt an undeniable sense of rightness. The warm light shimmered on his eyes as he reached for her hand, weaving their fingers together. Conversation came in hushed tones now, as if they were the only two people in the world. And in that moment of vibrancy and hushed possibility, Ariana felt certain her once rival had turned into her best companion. The next day, they rented a small sailboat with a local guide to explore more remote pockets of the coastline. Turns out, the guide had a quick errand and suggested they wait in a small fishing village for an hour or two. This village, seemingly untouched by time, had bright pastel homes, girls giggling as they played by the water, and an old church with a white steeple. Wandering its winding sun-bleached paths, Ariana and David stumbled upon a modest wedding ceremony taking place beside the church. A few families gathered around the bride and groom as a local band played. It was an endearingly simple event, brimming with quiet joy. They lingered at a respectful distance, feeling flowers of emotion blooming within them as they watched the exchange of vows. Ariana stole a glance at David. A subtle idea glimmered, playing on both of their minds. Their eyes met. A nervous laugh escaped Ariana's lips. David's gaze refused to waver. Without speaking, they walked a little closer, taking in the heartfelt words of commitment echoing in the warm Caribbean air. When the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, beaming, Ariana and David found themselves holding hands tightly. With every joyous cheer from the small gathering, they felt a tug at their own hearts. The next conversation they had was quiet, uncertain, full of disclaimers and disclaimers to disclaimers, yet it led them somewhere they never expected. They talked about the possibility of an elopement, about how so many relationships remain stuck in dream stages and never fully bloom. Ariana worried it was too spontaneous, too sentimental. David echoed those apprehensions, but neither could deny the clarity they felt in this setting. They'd been orchestrating dream ceremonies for others all their professional lives, each time thinking they were experts in romance. And yet now they both grasped that true romance stirred in improvisation and risk, a moment so personal it seemed to leap straight from the heart. Within a few hours, they found the local parish officiant, who performed ceremonies on short notice. He recognized them from the wedding they had witnessed, and delighted at the possibility of performing another. Ariana, unable to stop smiling, frantically texted her best friend, letting her know where she was and what she was about to do. David borrowed a ring from a small jewelry shop, a delicate silver band with a single pearl, and Ariana managed to find a whirling white sundress at a boutique down the street. Everything could have been described as whimsical, impulsive, or crazy, yet it felt undeniably right. Late that afternoon, under the golden beams of a St. Lucian sun descending toward the horizon, Ariana and David exchanged vows. On that same little beach where they'd glimpsed another wedding mere hours before, their officiant recited a simple, heartfelt blessing about love and how it transforms strangers into soulmates. David's voice trembled as he promised to walk side by side with Ariana wherever their traveling hearts might lead them. Ariana's eyes welled with tears as she vowed to respect David's passion for elegance, while never giving up her desire for genuine, immersive warmth in everything they did. The only spectators were a handful of local children and a fisherman or two who'd paused to watch love unfold. The gentle hush of rolling surf underscored every word they spoke. They sealed their vows with a tender kiss as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sea with pinkish orange hues. In that instant, the distinct knowledge that they had stepped into an entirely new life made them feel weightless. Here they stood, two rival travel agents turned collaborators, now husband and wife, on an island shore that seemed like it had waited for them all along. When they finally pulled apart, Ariana couldn't stop giggling. David, grinning from ear to ear, swept her into his arms. It was a spontaneous elopement on which they staked their hearts, unplanned and yet ironically the most expertly orchestrated romantic getaway of their entire careers. That evening, they found themselves slow dancing under a moonlit sky on a secluded patch of sand. The occasional gentle wave lapped at their feet. The glimmering reflection of moonlight made it appear as if shards of silver danced across the water. With arms wrapped around each other, they swayed without music, content to create their own rhythm. They both recognized that everything that had led them there, the rivalry, the forced collaboration, the simmering tension, had somehow culminated in the most extraordinary twist of fate. In the days that followed, they extended their stay, seamlessly blending honeymoon bliss into their Caribbean trip. They swapped out any lingering work responsibilities for stolen kisses, morning swims, and champagne toasts beneath tropical stars. At night, wrapped in thin cotton sheets, they whispered about the improbable journey that had started with dueling proposals and ended with them bound in love. They promised each other that they would continue using their travel expertise not only for clients, but to keep the flame of adventure alive in their own marriage. Eventually, a return to reality awaited them, but the memory of taking that leap of faith would remain in the foundations of their marriage, much like the beaches where they exchanged vows were anchored in the unshakable bed of the sea. Their partnership had become deeper than any business collaboration. As they stepped onto the plane back home, Ariana rested her head on David's shoulder. Their flight was no longer just part of a job, but the continuation of a life they'd chosen to share. And in that realization, they carried with them a timeless reminder. Sometimes the journey you plan for others is precisely the one your own heart has been waiting to take.